Welcome to Conversations with the Modern Girl, the podcast hosted by myself, Shamika Patterson, the guru of mental health and well-being. Join me as we embark on a journey of exploration and discovery, as we deepen our thoughts, as we discuss topics that affect our community. I coin myself the queen of randomly thinking, and as I'm randomly thinking and having these discussions in these podcast episodes, I invite you to join me with these thought-provoking discussions on a wide range of subjects, from lifestyle trends to the culture of the Black church, and also discussing some obstacles that we face in middle-class America, also to the intersection of mental health and well-being. Be prepared to be inspired, challenged, and empowered as we engage in meaningful conversations that aim to spark positive change and personal growth. Get ready to expand your horizons and enhance your understanding of these important issues in Conversations with the Modern Girl. Thank you for tuning in on today as we're going to be conversating with Miss Cindy Ransom here on Conversation with the Modern Girl. I'm so glad to have you with us today. Cindy is out of Orlando, Florida, and her practice is My Best Self Therapy. It is outstanding. She also has an awesome coaching business called Volume Up Coaching. And today we're going to be talking about teenagers. We're going to be talking about some of those moods. We're going to talk about some therapy things that parents of teenagers want to know, especially with this generation of teenagers. We want to know how to navigate parenthood in this space, with our teenagers. We want to be the best that we can be for our teens. And our teens face a whole lot of different things that we did not growing up, because every generation is different. We know that. So it helps to have the tools in place to be able to help us, equipped us to be able to manage and pour into our teenagers, to understand them, to give them an outlet, to give them resources and support as they are growing into young adulthood. And when I talk about teens, I'm talking about those ages like 13 up to like 18. We just want to kind of capture that whole group right there. And I don't think it's enough conversations out there about that. And I love to have a conversation about things that are not often talked about. So here we go. We just have a few questions and we're just going to stimulate this conversation here. Cindy, welcome. Welcome
Thank
aboard.
you so much.
So
My
glad
pleasure.
to have you. So glad to have you. I just want to jump right into it. How do teenagers today define their identity in this world that we have social media, all these constant comparisons? What role would you say we as parents play in helping our teens develop a healthy sense of self during this critical transition into young adulthood?
Yeah, this is great. Thanks so much for having me on. And I just love this topic. As a marriage and family therapist, this is sort of my bread and butter in helping parents kind of work with this population as well. Social media has really kind of done a number on us. Especially with the kids. It's very impactful when it comes for teenagers, especially like in those sensitive periods, like you just mentioned. That 13 to 18
Yeah.
is really a sensitive period, is what we call it, for development, because they're kind of going into puberty, or they've just started, all of that, or they're very deep into it. I mean, I go to my daughter's high school and there are grown men there, and I'm just
Right.
like, they're tall and they got beards and
Yes.
tattoos, and I'm just like, where's your mom? Media they've done a lot of studies in regards to the way that it impacts in regards to comparison, right? And so ultimately, girls are more susceptible to comparison versus the boys. So whatever it is that they end up consuming during this time period is really going to dictate the culture of what shapes them during this time. So I always encourage parents to be aware of what they're watching. So a lot of times parents get really caught up on screen time, like
Mhm.
how much time they're spending on it. But not all screen time is created equal. Right. So watching an age appropriate movie isn't the same as, doom scrolling. Researching isn't the same as playing video games.
Mhm.
So I'm always encouraging them to make sure that they're aware of what it is that their children are consuming, especially during those, really, really critical times, because we know that there's just an increased level of anxiety and depression during this time when their hormones are going all
Right.
crazy.
Right.
In regards to like what parents can do, parents really should just model good behavior, treating one another with respect, treating everyone in the household with respect. And I always encourage them to lead with genuine curiosity.
Mhm.
A lot of times we're just like, we don't understand what that skibbity toilet, we don't want to talk about that. That's nonsense. So parents have a tendency to be very dismissive. And listen, it is sort of a nonsense language. And studies have shown that they kind of gravitate towards it and it causes disconnection because now they can't communicate with their parents and the parents aren't interested in communicating with them because it's just a nonsense language.
Right.
So leading with curiosity, genuine curiosity, asking questions, showing an interest in what they're doing, and even if you don't understand it, even if you don't want to, right?
Mhm.
Also, I think for parents, it's important to recognize how self esteem and confidence is very key in regards to helping shape and, mold and sort of like being a little bit more at ease
Yes.
when it comes to whatever it is that they're consuming. So, confidence works with giving them, responsibilities,
Mhm.
allowing them to feel and experience failures
Yeah.
so that way they can improve their decision making. Natural consequences is what we call it. We're very quick to just be like, take your coat, here's your coat, you forgot your coat, I'm going to take your coat for you. Now you're going to wear your coat. But it's just kind of like, if you let the natural consequences come in, let them forget the coat. They'll
Yeah.
be cold or not, you know what I mean? And then they'll feel
Figure it
sort
out
of
and
that.
understand. This
Exactly,
is what
and
I
that
need to
will
do
help
for
them.
myself. Yeah, I totally understand what you mean by that. And we have that transition where, like my son's in sixth was is in sixth grade and going to seventh grade. And I encountered a lot of mothers that was just like helicopter moms.
Hmm.
And I mean, as far as even like having them do things that little kids do, these programs, these cheesy programs at the school, they're sixth grade. And we're getting them ready for middle school. Let's, give them something of, a little bit more mature for them to do instead of singing at grandparents day. Maybe, they pass out some things or help with the little kids, getting them lined up, or, doing something a little bit more constructive and hands-on, or, letting them take over the program and try to do things like that, that I feel like help stimulate that independence as well. And so that ability to be able to fail gracefully, but to
Yes.
have that guidance to help them understand that it's okay and this is how you recover. Things like that I notice with those preteens as they're moving through. They need that independence. They need that. And it's not just independence in sports and learning those skills in sports, because a lot of parents push that into the sports. And then, I noticed that this generation grew up with the electronics. And a lot of
Mhm.
parents allow the electronics to occupy them, which causes less engagement. Then when your
Yes.
child gets to like your ages of 10, 11, and 12, you barely know who your kid is because you haven't had that interaction with them. Not shunning those parents that use those devices, but helping them understand and see that there has to be some type of limitations. Like you said, screen time is monitored in different ways. It's different from watching Coco Melon or watching, something funny movie on your iPad to like, or reading a book,
Mhm.
on your Kindle, to just scrolling like TikTok or scrolling YouTube and watching less dumb, ignorant stuff. It's just kind of different. You said something about those moods, and, I want to touch on that because the common mental health challenges that teenagers face today as they approach adulthood can, really be hard on parents. So, how can they effectively support their children in managing their stress, their anxiety, and their depression during this time? Because it is common. I find myself telling them that it is common to have that kind of like seesaw up down
Mhm.
of things. Your kid's not crazy. They're not crazy. They're managing these hormones. But what is a way that we can, identify these mental health challenges and then kind of allow these parents to understand and know how they can support them when they're managing this stress or anxiety or depression as they are maturing?
Absolutely. I think that transitioning into adulthood is just more stressful today than it ever
Mhm.
was. I mean, my daughter is 14; she's turning 15 this year, and my son's 13. And their schoolwork. is
Oh my
just so
God.
like my daughter's a freshman in high school and she is taking college level courses, and
Yes.
that math
I cannot.
I can't even deal with it. But in addition to that, even just the things that were our goals from our time, which was like, you get good grades and then you kind of take senior year off. If you take those extra courses, and you can take senior year a little light. That's not expected anymore.
No.
Now, when you go into college, they expect you to have full curriculum in
Yeah.
that senior year.
Dual
They expect
enrollment
you to
is
have,
like common. You got to have this dual
yep,
enrollment going on. So you're
dual
taking these
enrollment,
college courses. Yeah.
extracurriculars, very involved in community. So the stakes are much higher in regards to getting higher education, just in general. And so this kind of pressure, even the tracks, the way that the high schools are sort of set up, where they say, okay, well, you pick your track now in high school for what kind of profession it is that you want to
Right.
do. And I've
Right.
had my kids say, like, what if I don't know if I want to be like a vet later? And it's like, it's okay.
Mhm.
You're not choosing the rest of your life right now. And it's sort of reaffirming in them that it's different when we grew up, where our parents told us, listen, it's going on your permanent record. High school's, like, this is it. Here we have to take a little bit more of a flexible and kind of fluid approach, where we're telling them, listen, this is high school. This is a moment of your life. And speaking to them in very candid, honest ways, and saying, all you have to do is do your best. Do your best here. This isn't going to be what dictates the rest of your life. Make smart choices. Try to surround yourself with positive peers, and, having that balance, because school is their job. After school activities become jobs for them as well. So making sure that they're not as overscheduled as much as possible, getting them into positive activities is great, but making sure that there is that quality time that you mentioned before.
Yeah.
If you see them struggling, right, the big thing to do is just keep those lines of communication open.
Mhm.
Plan for quality time. Plan for that time when you do get to know that kid again, and again, always genuine curiosity, like, what are you into? A great resource for parents that I always recommend are conversation cards. They sell them on Amazon, $8 here and there. We used to have them at the dinner table, and everybody would choose a card.
Okay.
And it's just different things that says, like, if you could have a superpower, what would it be? And
Mhm.
why? Or what's one kind thing somebody did for you today?
Right.
What's your so it goes beyond the conversation of, how was school? Fine.
Mhm.
Did you have a test? Yes.
Mhm.
How'd you do? Good. Right?
Yeah.
Just getting into knowing who their friends are,
Yes.
knowing what they're interested in, and really just making it so that they have a safe space to be able to talk about whatever it is
Yeah.
that's happening.
Yeah, I agree. And I think building that early on with your kids, like for example, I remember my children were much younger and they would get in the car and pick up. And my questions, like you said, would be somewhere around what made you happy today? Did something make you smile today? What they serve at lunch that made you happy when you saw it? Or did, something make you feel bad? Did something happen today to make you embarrassed? Asking questions like that really stimulated the conversations in the car is what I would call them. And so as they progressed and got older, they would cut in the car and just completely unload. They would be like, oh my God, I'm
Mm,
over. They would just overload me with everything that happened today. Although I welcomed it, it was
yeah.
overwhelming a bit for me as well. But in doing that, I was able to hear the stresses of that day. I was able to see and understand when I saw that my kids were a little sad, depressed, the changes in behaviors as they transition. My kids have moved a lot. So
Mm,
we've had to pick up and go different places in relation to my husband's job. So they were having to be the new kid a lot. And so the safe haven was talking to mom,
mhm,
and telling her what was happening, me being overly involved in friend group stuff that's going on and giving advice and things like that. So I would see the stress. I understand the friend group dynamic drama, the anxiety that these kids have, not just from my children moving, but just kids in general, from the tests, from being with this group that making the team. completing the
Not
expectations of your
making the team.
coach. Yeah. Expectations of your coach, expectations of your parents, expectations of your friends, not
Mhm.
really knowing yourself, who you are, still trying to figure that out. So that stress coupled with, feeling like you don't really fit in because you're in that awkward stage where you're maturing, you're growing. Like you said, they're getting tall, they feel a
Yeah,
little awkward. My feet are bigger than the rest of my body. I'm a little bit overweight. I'm having a little chubby. Or I'm too skinny, too thin. Those things that they all feel does cause a lot of stress and depression there. I just encourage parents to, like how you said, stay involved, keep the conversation going, read some stuff online to see how to engage them, figure out what it is that they do, even when they push you away, because it comes a point when some guys of the sons in lives that they like push parents away and shut down. And you have to kind of just keep showing up, not,
yes.
in a rude manner, but with love, and
And
just trying to
consistency.
understand.
And consistency. And what you're saying is so important is, creating those safe spaces. And I think that what's also important to recognize is that when you make those efforts to ask those questions and get to know and watch them play the game and have them explain it to you, kids
Mm-hmm.
love to teach you
Yes.
stuff. They love it. So like if you when you take those times to connect with them on these levels and you do it consistently, and we're not talking about you got to sit down and have a kumbaya with your kid
No.
every single day. We're talking about moments that you share and little times where you're making the effort to put your phone down and be
Right.
completely
Engaged.
invested
That's
in
right.
them. You know, the great thing about that is that when something is off,
You
you're gonna
know.
know it
You're gonna
immediately.
know.
You're
Yeah.
gonna know it immediately and you'll feel it. And we've all been teenagers. We
Yes.
all know what's sort of like a teenage thing and what might be something where we're just like, I don't know.
Mhm.
That mother's gut, that
Yeah.
mother's intuition, that thing that says like, I don't know, something just doesn't
Mhm.
feel like right. And I think that it's so important for, what you said to be able to have that space because the consistent thing that you did was have those talks,
Yes.
so it doesn't matter where you live.
Yes,
You know what I
right.
mean? And it doesn't, a lot of parents who come to see me for therapy, they'll be like, oh, my kid, he just fell in with this wrong crowd. He fell in
Mm.
with this bad crowd. Like, if you could just convince him, because they think that's what
Yeah.
I do.
Oh, yeah.
They're like,
Therapists are
if you could just
magic.
convince
We
him.
sprinkle pixie dust and it
Yes,
works. It
yes,
works.
girl, if I had that, I'd be making a heck of a lot more.
Would.
I would have the answer. They're like, "Oh, just if you could just fix him, just convince him that these peers are bad, convince him, ever since we came to this school, it's just been terrible." And I have to work with families to make them recognize that yes, environment might play a role and sure, peers might have some influence, especially at this age. This age, this 13 to 18 is really a very narcissistic age because not in sort of like the clinical way, but more so in that developmentally in
Mhm.
their mind, they are learning
Self-centered.
about their independence
Yeah.
and the whole world revolves around
Yes,
them.
they're
They are
self-centered.
talking
Yes.
about me,
Mhm.
the coach is mad at me,
Everyone is looking
my
at
mom
me.
does.
Yes.
Mhm. My mom doesn't understand me, like, oh, she's, like, oh, she didn't pick this up for me. They didn't do this for me. They're definitely saying something about me, but that's why they didn't call. And that's just normal for this developmental age, and they're just very susceptible to whatever it is
It
that's
is.
happening like
Yeah.
with them. And they take everything very, very
Oh
personally.
my God,
And
yes.
it's just, part of it is the hormones, but mostly it's just the brain is just developing.
It
They just
is.
haven't developed that sense of otherness where they say try to tell them, well, if your friend jumps off the bridge, will you jump off the bridge too? And they don't have that sense of consequence because their brain hasn't developed it. They think they can walk on water and they're not going to get hurt and
Right?
everything is going to be fine. But that's not a defiant thing. That's just a developmental brain thing.
Right.
And I think that when parents recognize that, then they don't have to take it so personally. Like, oh, he's being disrespectful. She
Mhm.
disrespected me. It's not a disrespect thing. I mean, sometimes they are being
It is, but
disrespectful. I'm not
sometimes
telling
it's
anybody to,
not. Most
you know,
times it's
but
not.
yeah, but most of the times it's just they don't have the words. They are
Mhm.
overwhelmed with emotions. They're changing. They've got all of these pressures about like being the best son, being the best daughter, being the best friend, being the best student, being the best athlete. And or being the worst, or being nobody. They're really trying to figure out what that identity is.
Yeah.
And so all of that really comes into play. Having safe spaces at home to be able to communicate and share openly is just such a strong way to be able to give them an opportunity to just express
Yeah.
whatever it is that's happening.
Just to be able, like you said, that safe space there, because those challenges that we face in communication with our teenagers can either make or break a relationship. We want them to have the independence to make choices. We want to respect them as a growing teen that needs privacy and things of that. So we also want to kind of keep the lines of communication open and respect them in the space that they're in. And that's a lot of things that I see sometimes when talking with families or parents in particular, when they're talking about their children. If you make a mistake, you're not too prone to accept or own up to it and ask for apology from your child. And that starts when they're little. If you say, hey, I told you to do this, that, and the third, and you didn't do it, and then your child comes back, and this is just an example, shows you, hey, I did complete this, and that's not what happened. Instead of saying, oh, well, I'm sorry, or your child feeling confident enough to say, when you said this, that to me, it offended me and it hurt my feelings, to even have that safe space for your child to be able to say that with you openly means so much, but it validates them. It gives them the ability to communicate effectively. It teaches them emotional intelligence. It teaches them conflict resolution skills. And so they're able to effectively communicate. But like you said, it starts, at home. It starts with them. And I think those challenges that a lot of us face when communicating with them and those dynamics between parents and teenagers is respecting them and meeting them where they are and allowing them the space to be able to say, now I'm not saying talk back. I'm not
Right.
saying, be disrespectful, but allowing them to have a voice, because we grew up in an era where it was sit down, shut up, do as I say. Don't ask me no questions, and then now we have these children. Well, I have these children that knows nothing about that. And so they speak very openly about what they feel and what their thoughts are and their opinions, but I have to allow them that space to have that so we can have that good dialogue. What do you think, or how do you think parents can foster that open and honest conversations while respecting their teenagers' growth, and their need for privacy as well?
Yeah, this is such a great conversation to have because honesty, like you mentioned, and creating an environment where there's not always judgment is so important when
Yeah.
it comes to that. And very frequently, when kids are younger, parents don't always quite know, like, well, how much do I tell them? How do I say this? And, in like the right way or in a
Right.
kid friendly way. But by the ages that we're talking about today, between like that middle school 13 to 18, they know a lot.
A
They
lot.
are exposed to a lot. I mean, if you think that, eighth graders aren't having sex in a
You're
bathroom,
crazy. You must be in a cave.
you're mistaken. I mean, I've heard the rumors and I've had parents see it firsthand,
Mhm.
but it's just a very different time. And so I think honesty in regards to just being, point blank, hey, listen, this is the situation. This is
Mhm.
where I'm coming from. Yeah, you could get taken, yeah,
Yeah.
this is a dangerous situation. Yeah, don't give your address away when you're online. You can't do that. That's not safe, and here are the reasons why. But there's so many documentaries that are out there now that, people recommend to watch with their kids, like Childhood 2.0 and, things like that, where it really allows you to be able to sit down, watch with your family, and then open up the dialogue. Sometimes a lot of parents don't quite know how to bring it up.
Yeah.
Like, how do I bring it up? I don't want to bring it up. We're all tiptoeing around it. And so it's really important to be able to maneuver ways that you can create that dialogue. You don't have to be the one to bring it up, but if your daughter shares with you, well, my friend, she's having sex with her friend and, or with her boyfriend, and I don't really know well, what do you think about that?
Yeah.
How do you
Yeah.
feel about that? Removing all of that judgment. And, there's a very great app that I recommend to parents in regards to privacy
Mhm.
because we do want to give them a level of respect in regards to saying, hey, listen, you're going to talk with your friends and they're going to curse with their friends
Of
and they
course.
might, they might not choose the best words because as we remember when we were in high school, we were very different kids in front of our parents than we were with our girlfriends, than we were with our little boyfriends, than we were with, you know, our cliques and
Yeah,
stuff like
of
that.
course.
We just you just adapt because again you're in that stage where you're trying to figure out who you are, but you're a lot of people to a lot of you're a lot of different roles for a lot of different
Mhm.
people. There is this app called the Bark app, which is very popular,
Yes.
but it's a fantastic app when you have like those younger kids, even teenagers as well. But if you have like that 13, 14, and they're getting ready to have those phones and they're getting ready to be on social media and things like that, this app is fantastic because not only do they give you articles about how to have a conversation with your kids about, hey, listen, I'm going to monitor
Yeah.
your conversations. But what it does that I think that's so genius is that it filters and monitors the conversations for you. So you're not reading word for word what it is that's on there. It just kind of scans it for any kind of negative activities, any sort of bullying, any sort of
The
violence,
tone of
any
things, the tone of
tone of things.
conversations. Yeah.
And what it does is when they have it on their phone and you have it on your phone, it'll send you a notification and it might say, sexual discussion. And then it'll screenshot you that section of the conversation. And you can set the severity of it. So
Mhm.
you can set it like I want to know everything, or you can set it to, I don't need to know, as much as they get older. But what I love about it is that it has these helpful articles and suggestions of like how to engage in this kind of dialogue and how to be aware, like that their messages are being monitored, but they're not being watched. So
Right.
it's a really, really great balance because it gives them the opportunity to say, hey, I saw that this popped up on your Bark app that somebody sent you something. I just wanted to check in with you and see like how you feel about that. But some of the things that it sends is I had it to the highest because I'm one of those parents. I was just
Uh-huh.
like, I want to know everything. And I just remember once I got a alert and it just said, physical violence and bullying, alert. And I was like immediately like,
Oh my
oh my
god, what's
gosh.
happening?
And then, I opened it up and it said it was a conversation my daughter was having with her friend. And it said, I fell off my bike and I cut my finger and there's a lot of blood. I just got a band aid. And that was the
Yeah.
screenshot of what it was. And I was just like, I should set this a little lower. I don't
Think that
necessarily
there's gonna be anything that I need to be alerted about.
I
Right.
don't need to be alerted about this. But, for parents, I think it's important that they want to have the information, but they also want to have the peace of mind. And they don't want to be picking up their kids' phones and scanning through all of their text messages cuz listen, the kids delete them
They
anyways.
delete
And
them
then,
anyway.
it's a whole like distrust thing. So, those are some things that I think that,
Good.
I suggest to some family
I
members.
think I think those are good things, and I think also it goes back to what we were saying earlier. You gotta be involved with your child from day one. So when you get to these teen years, you have developed a respect, you have developed a bond, you develop a line of communication to where you do get to the point where you want to let them have a phone. You have the conversation prior to, I'm trusting you with this phone to be responsible. If at any time I want to see your phone, you need to hand it over. You're not going to be on social media, until X amount of time. If you get a phone at 12, you can't be on social media till you get 13 or something like that. Setting those rules in place. And at night, your phone is taken up, especially on school nights. It's taken up at 9 o'clock. You don't get it back until in the morning, period.
Right.
I just think that we have to still parent as well as communicate. We have to still set that foundation there to give that sense of comfort and understanding that my mom does trust me, but there are still rules and regulations that I must
Yes.
do. And I think that kind of, gets it locked into their brain to when they are out and they're among friends, they can hear that voice echoing, I should not be doing this, or this is not feeling good, because they are in tune with the things that you have taught them, that you have discussed with them. And I like how you say using other things to help stimulate conversations, just like, regular stuff that comes on television, episodes that you see that happens. I used to use a lot of these stuff that I used to watch growing up, the sitcoms and stuff, and it
Mhm.
would
Speaking
stimulate
my
some.
language.
Yes, you would stimulate some great conversations and, open up that communication where you and your kid is talking about it. And I think that honesty is the best method. I mean, hey, I was young too. Hey, in middle school, no kids that were doing this. I was doing this, that, and the third. And being honest with your child and letting them know that you weren't perfect, that you did have these mistakes or encounter these things as well,
Mhm.
gives them almost a okay, it humanizes you as a parent. You're not just a parent, but you were once that girl that, was in the same situation as me, or with like their dad. Oh, you was that dude. You know how it feels to be like, hey, I don't want to vape, but everybody else is vaping, and you may can relate to it because it was like that about weed. You know what I'm saying? Hey, I didn't want to smoke weed, or hey, I tried weed once and it did this to me. And, I'm just letting you know because this is the real. I just think having those types of conversations with your children helps. Not telling someone else's story, but telling your own story and your own
Exactly.
encounters. Like my kids know what marijuana smells like because can't go nowhere anymore without smelling it at some
Without
point. They
smelling
know
it, yeah.
that I've never smoked marijuana, but I had friends that did, and I've been in the car with them, and I probably got high off of contact. I have those conversations because I want them to understand that it's life.
Yeah,
It's life,
yeah. You can't
So
protect them from
you
everything.
can't
You can't
protect them
protect them
from
from
everything.
everything.
They gotta know, and like you said, they are way ahead of what you're thinking. They know far
Yeah.
more than you give them credit for.
For sure. I think that from a young age, kids pick up the energy like within the home. So they know when something's off,
Yes.
they know when something's happening. And I think that what parents really struggle with a lot is, and this is very much like aligned with where my coaching is going, is like, we grew up with that old school sort of discipline, and it doesn't really work with these new gen kids
No.
because they have a completely different world. And so we're kind of caught in between, and that's exactly what my program is about bridging the gap and learning the tools and the skills to parent different, and in ways where we yell less and we connect more. And I think that the big thing, the pain point that parents feel is like they don't quite know how to make those boundaries. They don't quite want to be that disciplinarian. They
Yeah,
don't
they wanna
quite
be the
they really
friend.
struggle with that. And
They
it's
do.
not it's like this fear that goes on where they might feel like, well, if I set this boundary and then she gets mad, she's going to hate
You're
me,
gonna hate
right?
me and not talk
And
to me and shut me
right, and
out.
not talk to me. But what I find fascinating is there's something that's very interesting that occurs when people have, children. So psychologically what happens is whatever age your child is, you the self projects yourself in them at that age. So if I'm a mother and I have a 15-year-old girl, right? I see myself
Right.
as that 15-year-old girl. And so we sort of get rewired to reparent. And so psychologically, we're drawn to reparent. But what ultimately happens is that when we're parenting, so when I'm parenting my daughter, I'm not parenting her from her perspective. I'm parenting her from like, well, my mom did this, or my
Mhm.
mom didn't do this, or I was afraid of this at this time and at this age. But guess what? My daughter might not have
May
been
not
afraid
be.
of that. She's
Yeah.
a completely different person. And so we parent from a place where we're reparenting ourselves, and we're trying to provide these skills, or we're trying to provide something. And the kids are just kind of like, I just want you to see me. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not worried about like that peer pressure stuff. I'm more worried about my weight. You know what
Mhm.
I mean? Like my health. Or I'm not really worried about not making the team. I'm really more worried about what my friends are saying online. And I think that with this kind of like parenting struggle of setting that boundary, that hot and cold, that, well, I just don't want to do it this way. It's really a pain point. And that really was what inspired me to kind of go into coaching specifically to address that and bridge that,
That's great.
because there's just no way to be able to just be like, because I said so
No, it doesn't
now,
work.
and connect with your kids. You can do that. And there's nothing wrong with doing that, because, I always say apples make apples. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? Like, this is our first time parenting too.
Yeah,
It's my first time having a 15-year-old daughter.
that's
It's
right.
my first time having a 13-year-old son. And so I always encourage parents to give yourself grace.
Please do.
You're
Please.
you're learning, that's why they call it learning and not knowing, but we feel like, well, we're the parent,
And we're
we
supposed
should
to know.
know. But guess what? Those things that you're still holding on to from your childhood
Yeah,
is because your parents didn't know what the heck they were doing at the
that's
time.
right.
Everyone does the best they can with the information they have at the time and the resources available to them at the time.
That's right.
That's all we can do. And so you're going to mess them up and you might make a mistake and you might yell and you might do all of those things. And that's perfectly fine. As long as you're able to give yourself permission to reflect, take accountability, take responsibility, and sort of say, like, okay, well, that's something that triggered me. This is something that I want to change. I can apologize for this and
Yeah.
say, I recognize this is going to happen, but I'm not going to just apologize. I'm going to actually
Do this
make an
change.
effort to
Yeah.
change.
That's right. Put action behind it. Yeah. And
Exactly.
that
So important.
and that skill right there builds better adults. When you respect your children in their position and where they are and their growth, I think that it just builds better character. It builds their esteem. It
Hmm.
makes them more apt to have conversations with you when you humanize yourself. And when I say humanize yourself, I mean like in the essence of, yeah, I make mistakes too. I shouldn't have said that. I overreacted when you told me you were going to your friend's house and I found out you really wasn't going there and you snuck and went somewhere else. I'll react. I'm glad you're here. You're safe, but hey, we can't do that again. And this is going to be the consequence behind it. You can't be afraid to parent. You can't be. And you can't be your child's friend. We'll be friends later on in life when you're in your 30s. But right now, I
Yes.
have to be a parent and I have to be an understanding parent. I have to be a nurturing parent. I have to be a listener and I have to be a doer. Just like you said, I have to be accountable myself and be okay to crash and burn and say, I messed up right there. I shouldn't have done that. This was not fair to you. It wasn't fair to me. And this is how we're going to fix it. So I think that also will help decrease some of the anxiety, the depression, that and the stress that some of our children experience out in the world. If we can just be that calm and be that space at home, that understanding our communication styles at home, I think it better equips them when they go outside of the home. And then that helps reduces those things that trigger them to have more stress, to trigger them to have depression, to make them have anxiety. So in talking about those things of stress, anxiety, and depression, how beneficial do you think therapy is for teens? And I'm not just speaking about teens that have challenging mental health issues or illnesses, but teens that are just trying to navigate, to get to adulthood. How beneficial do you think therapy is for you to say, you know what, I'm doing the best that I can, but I think, I see some things that's different. I think he or she or they or them would benefit from going to therapy a couple of sessions just to have someone else to talk to. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think that this is such an important topic. I think the first thing that we want to do is we want to be able to identify what's teenage stuff and when do we really need sort of that extra hand. Just because depression, anxiety, all of this is just so rampant. I mean, when
Uh-huh.
it comes to depression, there is a lot of sleeping a lot,
Right.
isolating, uh, very lots of hopelessness.
Uh-huh.
With anxiety, you want to be on the lookout for really excessive worries, perfectionism. Right, that kind of like I can't do it until I staying up super super late until they get it done. Like, for us, it was something that we just needed to do and push through. Now it's very anxiety inducing when they have that perfectionism. Might cause panic attacks. Definitely, if they're experiencing panic attacks, and in regards to stress, if they're overly irritable, right? Overly irritable, if they're having a lot of avoidance, if they're not engaging in healthy activities, I definitely recommend that at that point in time, you open up the conversation for therapy.
Yeah.
Even like a big thing right now for parents is like, oh, he's addicted. He's addicted to social
Uh-huh.
media. He's
Uh-huh.
addicted to the video games. Now it is in the DSM 5,
It
as
is.
a diagnosable thing. Things to look out for that, just so your audience knows, like, oh, well, how much of this is just, oh, all the kids are on this versus like this is an issue. Is if it's interfering with other areas of functioning? Like, is it interfering with school? Is it interfering with their work, their friendships, their extracurricular
Their
activities?
hygiene, their rooms
Right,
and
their
chaos
hygiene.
and yeah, their anger, their
Exactly.
explosive behaviors, you know?
If they're experiencing strong cravings to check social media, if they
Yeah,
lie to spend time online, if they, choose social media over an in-person social interaction all
right.
the time, right? If it's preventing them from getting sleep, if it's preventing them from engaging in physical activity, if they keep using the social media even after they've expressed a desire to be like, I can't be on my phone
Yeah,
anymore, but they keep doing it, those are things to be mindful of, to be like, maybe it'll be good for you to talk to somebody. And I think that therapy is such an incredible tool and a resource for parents and for families. For me, when I see people in therapy, like for kids 12 and under, I always suggest family therapy.
mhm.
I won't see anybody 12 and under unless I'm seeing the whole family, because I know that whatever it is that's happening, it's
That
being impacted
environment.
by the
It's
family
that
dynamic.
environment.
So everyone needs to be aware of what it is that's happening. But, ages 13 and up, when I start seeing adolescents and teenagers, it's just a safe space for them to share their opinions without their family sort of influence.
Right.
It allows them the opportunity to take accountability and responsibility for the choices that they're making, to learn different tools, to learn effective ways to communicate in a way where it's not an environment where they feel like they're being judged or
Yeah.
led in a certain way. So it just gives them the opportunity to explore their emotions and just learn to find their words, especially in this critical time where they're
Yes.
figuring out who they are.
Yes.
It's just such a vital resource that allows kids to really have the space. And like you mentioned, you don't necessarily have to wait until your kid is like, failing school and
Yeah.
having so much issues. Sometimes it's just, listen, we've got a lot of single moms out there and they don't know how, they don't have time to, sit down and do those one-on-ones with their kids as much as they would love to. Therapy is a great resource to be able to say, I have somebody else in my community, somebody else on my squad, somebody else in my village
Yeah.
that I know is looking out for the best benefit of my child.
That's right.
And it can give them that peace of mind to be able to talk to somebody and say, like, I'm concerned about this, I'm concerned about this. How do I help them? And that's one of the things that I really enjoy helping people with as a marriage and family therapist is, giving them the tools and saying, like, hey, listen, let's utilize some acceptance here. Like, he's probably not going to get these clothes in the hamper. How long are you going to continue to
Yeah.
have this argument with him? How beneficial is this for you? Like, is this really how you want to spend your time communicating? Like, you know what I mean? Like, is it worth it if you don't have that much time? And that doesn't mean they get a free pass for everything, but just checks and balances and being able to identify, like, who am I? Who am I now? Who is a parent that I want to be? How do I want to show up? How do I want to model this? What cycles, what generational cycles is it that I want to end? That I
Yeah.
want to improve,
Yeah.
that I want to make sure that, I leave my kids a little bit better off than where I was. All of these things like inspire me in private practice and in my coaching, to be able to have parents utilize this resource, utilize it in a way where they can really feel empowered and also allow their kids to create a better connection with
I
them,
love it.
because that connection is so important. And it is
Very.
very easy to just be like, listen, you get on your screen,
Yeah. Leave
you
me
go do
alone.
this and leave me alone, and that's fine. And I think that that's why the parents really need to focus in on their self-care
That's
and
right.
what it is that they're doing, and how, if the phone is the first thing that you pick up first thing in the morning, then your kid is probably going to get into that habit as well.
That's right.
If you're not giving yourself an hour before you get on your phone and you're inviting thousands upon thousands of people into your mind and your life first
Mhm.
thing in the morning,
That's
then you're not going to be at your best,
that's right.
and you're not going to be able to model the best behavior. And we're not shaming those parents. Everybody does it, but it's just a matter of recognizing that they know more than you think. They pick up on more than you think. And if you're If you're like, oh my gosh, this kid, he never gives me eye contact. He's always screaming at me from across the room. Oh, yeah. Well, when was the last time that you weren't screaming at them? Hey, listen, come down from your
Uh-huh.
room. I'm giving you till the count of three. Don't forget to do your laundry. And they're all the way on the other side of the house. You're
Mm-hmm.
not giving them eye contact.
Yeah,
You're not
no,
telling
no.
them, you're not going over there and looking at them and doing that. Um, it's important to be mindful of sort of how our behaviors are also sort of mirrored and
That's right.
triggered by them. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, I totally do, and I think that that's where the, breakdown is with our generation. We say we want our youth to change, we want our youth to be better, but we have to hold ourselves accountable and model that because they're mirroring what they see, and if we're not gonna hold the line, is what I like to say. If we're not gonna hold the line and be accountable, be, present, be understanding and teachable, learning from one another so that we can implement that in front of our youth, in front of our children, and put these expectations on them to be their best self and equip them with the way to define their best self. Then, if we can't do that, then we can't blame them for the changes that we see. We must lead by example. And I feel like laying that path for them, changing the narrative, is going to require us as parents to be engaged and understand how to communicate, understand how to notice changes in our children's behavior, how to understand their groups and the influences that are around them, being open to whatever is happening in their lives and being gentle and sensitive with it so that you can be engaged and they don't tune you out. I just think this has been a great all around conversation about our teenagers. One that, like I said, should often be discussed. It should be discussed more so, and I may do a part two to it. But I appreciate you, Cindy, for coming
Yeah.
and speaking with us again. Cindy is a therapist with My Best Self Therapy. She's out of Orlando. She also has Volume Up Coaching. Cindy, please let the listeners know how to get in contact with you if you see patients in person, online. Give us the whole jazz.
Yeah, I love that. And yes, this conversation has been so wonderful. And I just appreciate you so much bringing this to your audience. And it is sort of like an age range that kind of everybody throws their hands up in the air and they're like,
Yeah,
we don't know what to do. It just so happens to have aligned that this is my wheelhouse. These are the people who I serve. So I'm so happy to be able to share this information with you. So, in regards to my private practice and my therapy, everybody can find me at my best self therapy.com. You can also follow me on Instagram at my best self therapy. And for any parents, any millennial parents out there who are looking to change things up and figure out different ways to yell less and connect more, I am launching a parent support group for millennial parents. It's all 90s
wonderful.
inspired, 2000 inspired. It's
Yes.
got that whole vibe. It's called Drop the Beat, Not the Ball.
Oh, I love
And
it.
it's improving your parenting in just 4 weeks. So we do information. So we do we do 6 sessions of information getting where we identify our triggers, improve our self care. So we do a lot of learning. You get an additional one-on-one with me to talk about your needs, your unique home needs in regards to where your parenting kind of needs a little bit extra sort of attention. And then for those that are in the Orlando area, I'm also going to be hosting an in-person event at the end just to kind of bring back the village. So do like something in real life. So that's going to be on volumeupcoaching.com. And you can also find me on Instagram at Volume Up Coaching. I'm offering a good deal for the month of May, $100 off for Mother's Day month.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I really appreciate you giving me a chance to come out here
Wonderful.
and talk about what I'm passionate about, which is these kids and these parents and, this love of mine of helping parents connect with their kids and support. And I just truly appreciate and humbled and honored that you are bringing this to light for your audience because I know that it's something that is, of benefit. So thank you
That's
so much
right.
for having me.
No problem. Thank you so much, Cindy, for taking time out your day to be on Conversation with the Martin Girl. We have thoroughly enjoyed you, and we'll invite you back so we can talk a little bit
Yes.
more about Volume Up Coaching and My Best Self Therapy. As you heard her say, please go look for her on Instagram, on social media, also volumeupcoaching.com. You can find Cindy. I will drop her handles in my in my YouTube as well as on my Instagram. So when you see the reels out there and all the stuff, show Cindy some love, reach out, like and follow her, subscribe, do all the good things so we can help her be able to reach the masses and be able to implement these plans and things and process in place to help our parents be our best selves for our future little babies that are growing up to be young adults. So thank you again, Cindy, for your time. And if there's any way I can help you in any way, please let me know. And so thank you for all things. Take care.
Thanks.
Thank you to all the listeners out there. I ask you to please go to my YouTube page and like and subscribe to Conversations with the Martin Girl. Also, take the time to follow me on my social handles. Instagram is Martin Girl Movement. Facebook, same Martin Girl Movement. Thank you.